Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what's up? Welcome to part one of the week 9 edition of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Can't believe it's week 9 already. We got 5 NFC home games to go through here tonight. I got a couple interesting little bet spots that I like. I'll share those with you. You guys can let me know what you think, because realized this past week I'm a horrible podcast producer because I never gave out any of our social media outlets or handles, I guess. So if you want to go on and check us out on Facebook, it's the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast, and on Twitter it's at Beers capital N Bruisers. If you have any comments on any of my analysis, you want to drop any comments or on either one of those, I'm more than happy to check those out for sure. If you have any players that you think we should be talking more about, let me know, and we'll get them onto the podcast. So there's that. And the first game we're going to go through is obviously the Thursday night game. So this is the 49ers at the Cardinals. At first glance, you see that George Kittle has the best matchup, and one of the best matchups in fantasy football. You combined an Arizona defense that's giving up the most fantasy points to tight ends, and George Kittle, who's he was drafted as one of the top 3 tight ends. This is as good as it gets. So in FanDuel, if you're looking for the easy tight end play, it's probably going to be one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, but it's the best matchup you can get. Emmanuel Sanders gets traded over to the 49ers, and he scores in his first game. I really think he's going to be a monster on this team. Kyle Shanahan, such a creative play caller, and he will get Emmanuel Sanders involved for sure. We've seen him throw touchdown passes. We've seen him run jet sweeps, catch bubble screens. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders has done it all, and I think versatility is one of the biggest things that the coaching staff there they look for. So I think he's going to be awesome on this team. I would try and trade for him now while his value is as low as it's going to be all season. I think obviously he's the best wide receiver on that team now. So if you're lucky enough where you had him prior to this trade, good for you. I think his value only went up for sure. Telvin Coleman had a huge game again, 4 total touchdowns. Yeah, right. Didn't he have one receiving? Yeah, he did. So 4 total touchdowns, 105 rushing yards on only 11 carries. He's great, and the Cardinals defense is really bad at defending running backs from catching passes, and that's another thing that this offense loves to do. So Telvin Coleman's going to be great, and depending on which one of these other backup running backs with San Francisco 49ers plays, all 3 of them are kind of banged up right now. You got Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson all dealing with various injuries. So I think whichever one besides Coleman is active, I would go with them for sure. This Cardinals defense is bad, and the 49ers absolutely love to run the ball. So I'm going to go with either one of those running backs. On the Cardinals side, I think Kenyon Drake is really the only one. Kenyon Drake and Christian Kirk are really the only guys that I'd be willing to play on the Cardinals side this week. Even Kyler Murray, I think I'd be inclined to sit him if I'm a team that has 2 quarterbacks. Rookie quarterback playing on a short week in a division game against one of the best defenses in football. They're down, their top two running backs. Larry Fitzgerald has been playing like crap for the past few weeks. So I think you play Christian Kirk solely because of the volume. 11 targets last week coming off of that injury. He caught 8 of them for 79 yards. Pretty good game. And I think they're going to have to use Kenyon Drake, especially catching the ball. The running back position with the Cardinals here has a 20% target share on the season, so they're going to throw him the ball. I think Kenyon Drake is a pretty good start in PPR leagues, just considering how many teams are on bye this week and all that. So, I'm playing Kenyon Drake and I'm playing Christian Kirk, but besides that, that's it for me. Although the 49ers are in the top 3 for fewest fantasy points allowed to all 4 of the position groups, they allow the 6th most receptions to running backs. So maybe that's one thing that the Cardinals can kind of focus on, which makes Kenyon Drake all the more enticing. It seems like he may be the only running back out of the 3. When you're looking at Chase Edmonds and David Johnson, he seems like the only one that's actually going to play. So you play him because of those touches. He's probably going to get targeted, and the 49ers have shown that that's maybe one thing they don't do great. So one interesting thing about the Cardinals, though, Charles Clay with 3 deep targets versus the Saints. There was a 47-yard flea flicker that he caught and 2 other 20-yard deep passes. So maybe that's something that we see from them as well. Maybe something you can count on in FanDuel, but I'm not playing him in seasonal leagues for sure. One quick stat about Raheem Mostert, which is, if he's playing, I'm playing him. He's averaging 5.7 yards a carry this season. In the 2 games that Mostert got double-digit carries, he had 79 yards and 150 total yards. So if Breida is out, I think Mostert's definitely the guy. All right, moving on to Da Bears and the Eagles here. Actually, I think I'm going to take the Bears +5 in this game. Lost the last 3 games with the bye in the middle of that. They lost by 3 to Oakland. They lost by 11 to New Orleans, which wasn't all that great. But then they lost by 1 last week to the Chargers. A game that they should have won if it wasn't for their lousy-ass kicker. I really like Matt Nagy versus Doug Peterson in what is kind of a revenge game, I guess. These 2 guys were both coordinators under Andy Reid. I think they're both going to be looking to put some points up on the scoreboard for sure. So I think the defense shows up, and I think the Bears get off of the losing streak here in Philly, and they're getting 5 points. So I like the Bears in this game. I think Matt Nagy pulls out all the stops. I think following a loss that he was, so heavily scrutinized for just sitting on the ball for the last 3 plays before, kicking it. I think he's going to come out and do some big stuff. I think Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel are both worth playing this week. The Eagles' pass defense is not very good. They're allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think this is the week to play those guys. And even after holding the Bills' wide receivers to under 100 receiving yards total last week, the Eagles still allow the most fantasy points to wide receivers. So it's definitely a great matchup for these wide receivers. David Montgomery with a season-high 31 touches last week, 147 total yards, and a touchdown. As a Montgomery owner, I hope this is a sign of things to come, but with him averaging only 12 carries a game and 2 games this season with under 7 carries, it seems like consistency is Montgomery's biggest problem. The Eagles' run defense is their strength for sure. They allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs. They just held the Bills to under 100 total rushing yards on the team. That's including the quarterback, Josh Allen, who loves to run the ball. So as you would expect, Tariq Cohen's workload suffered with Montgomery playing so well. He actually saw 2 less targets than Montgomery did for the first time this season. Cohen had a smaller target share. And the Eagles actually allow the 6th fewest receptions and receiving yards to running backs. So maybe this is another week that the Bears kind of try and focus on David Montgomery and not necessarily trying to get as many of those targets and touches to Tariq Cohen. I think Montgomery showed last week that if you give him a workload, he can produce. So the Eagles can also run the crap out of the ball, is what they showed last week. Over 200 team rushing yards. Jordan Howard with most touches since week 3 of last season. Miles Sanders with a long 65-yard touchdown run. I'm not going to play Sanders versus this Bears D that last week held the Chargers running backs to under 40 rushing yards on 12 carries. The Bears defense is not what it was last year, but it's still pretty good. They forced the Chargers to 5 3-and-outs on their 10 drives. So half of the Chargers' drives were 3-and-outs. The Bears defense maybe is turning things around here. And and after the Eagles, after what the Eagles did running the ball with Jordan Howard last week, I think he's an okay flex at least. And these Eagles tight ends, man, they're clearly splitting targets now. They're very unique situation in that they're two awesome tight ends. I think the only other team that can maybe compare is probably the Colts, maybe. They play a lot together. The Eagles use this double tight end set a lot, especially with Deshaun Jackson missing almost the entire season now. Over the past 3 games, these two Eagles tight ends, that's Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, obviously they each have 17 targets, but Goddard has 30 more yards and he has 2 touchdowns to Ertz's 0 touchdowns. I don't know how you can sit Zach Ertz. I have him in 2 leagues, and I haven't sat him because I don't know. I can't bring myself to do it. But if you're one of these guys that drafted 2 tight ends and one of them is starting to play really well, if you were one of the guys that drafted Darren Waller late or Mark Andrews late, then I think those are the only situations where you can realistically sit Zach Ertz because he just has so much potential, and he's shown in the past. That he's one of the best in the game, so I'm not sitting him. But Dallas Goedert has definitely become a thorn in the ass of Zach Ertz owners for sure. Going back to Jordan Howard real quick, this is a special game for him as well. He did spend some time with the Bears, so we're looking at another revenge game for Jordan Howard. He played great last week, and I'd be willing to throw him in my flex again this week and see what he can do. All right, we got the Dallas Cowboys going out to play the New York Football Giants. With the Giants, you got Saquon. Obviously, he's a beast, 140 total yards last week and a touchdown. You're going to play him no matter what. Golden Tate also gave you a nice starting stat line with Ingram bouncing back. He had a 12-point game. Golden Tate caught 8 of his 10 targets for 85 yards. So I think those 3 guys are the ones you want to look at to play. Sterling Shepard, he apparently was in contact drills today, so that's obviously a good sign for a guy that was in concussion protocol. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this offense when we finally do get to see Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate consistently on the field together. So until then, I'm going to go by what I've seen, and that's Golden Tate getting 10, multiple targets in multiple weeks. So I'm going to play Tate. And if Sterling Shepard is active, I'd consider throwing him in my flex. The Cowboys are probably going to put up some points, and maybe Daniel Jones tries to get it going with Sterling Shepard. But the Cowboys do allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers and the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I'm not sure if I really want to take that risk if I don't have to. So looking at the Cowboys, they all have great matchups. The Giants give up the 3rd most to wide receivers. So I'm playing Gallup. I'm playing Amari Cooper. You're playing Zeke no matter what. The one guy I'm getting away from on the Cowboys side is Jason Witten. The Giants allow the fifth fewest fantasy points to tight ends, and I know that Jason Witten has kind of beat up the Giants in the past. I don't know. I'm not feeling it this week, but we'll see what happens. I'm sure he'll end up with 12 yards and a touchdown. Alrighty. The Tennessee Titans at the Carolina Panthers. So after the Panthers allowed over 200 rushing yards to the 49ers last week with 5 touchdowns, I think we might see a good game from Derrick Henry. With Ryan Tannehill coming in and playing well, I think that might somewhat open things up a little bit for Derrick Henry. I know teams know that this team that the Titans want to run the ball. They're going to run the ball. But yeah, I'm willing to play Derrick Henry this week for sure. The Panthers are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to running back, so he does have a good matchup. The Titans offense is just such a conundrum, though. They play the Bucs, who are they're good against the run and bad against the pass. Yet A.J. Brown and Corey Davis both finished with 2 catches and under 12 yards. But Derrick Henry has the decent game. So it's just you can't read this team. I think we need another week against a decent defense here to see really what this offense is going to look like. Last week we saw no Delaney Walker in the lineup, and the tight ends had a good matchup last week against the Buccaneers. And we saw Jonnu Smith and Anthony Firkser targeted 12 times, which was 36% of the target share. I don't know if that's something that's going to continue with Ryan Tannehill or if it was just the matchup thing. But if Delaney Walker is going to be out and Jonnu Smith is going to be getting the majority of these touches, I think Jonnu Smith's not a horrible streaming option, at least for the tight ends. All right. What else we got here for the Titans? I think that's really much it, man. A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, I'm not starting them yet. The offense is too inconsistent for me. So going towards the Panthers side, if McCaffrey shows us why he is a top dog. 156 total yards versus one of the best run defenses, one of the best defenses as a whole in the NFL against the 49ers last week. And Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore only caught 9 of their 20 targets. But like I said, that was a real tough defense. Kyle Allen threw 3 picks, which was the first interceptions he threw all season. And they got another pretty tough matchup here against the Titans. They allow the 10th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Not the greatest matchup. But all that being said, I'm taking the Panthers minus 3.5 in this game. I don't think this magical run of the Titans is going to continue. Honestly, they should not have won that game against the Buccaneers last week. That horrible, horrible call on 4th down in the 4th quarter, up 4 points. They run a fake kick. They pretty much, they tried handing the game to the Buccaneers, and then Jameis Winston was like, "Nah, I'm good." So I think I like the Titans going to Carolina. What do I have written down here? Titans' run defense is definitely their strength, but it won't matter against McCaffrey because he's the man. I think Kyle Allen can protect the ball better than Jameis Winston did last week. Winston with 4 turnovers. I think Kyle Allen, like I said, those were his first interceptions all year. So I think maybe they focus on that this week. And we just saw what the Buccaneers did against the Titans last week. Mike Evans went off, had a huge game. We'll get into that game next. But I think Curtis Samuels and DJ Moore can, put up close to what we saw from them. I'm not going to say that they're each going to have a 200-yard game, but I think they can both do pretty well. And, I like the Panthers at home minus 3.5. The Buccaneers at the Seahawks, the last game here on the of the NFC home games. Classic Jameis Winston, 2 interceptions with 3 fumbles. He lost 2 of them, but 300 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. He'll give you the good half of the stat line, and then it's always loaded at the back half. The only guys worth playing on this team to me are these 2 wide receivers. Unless O.J. Howard were to miss again, which he's been questionable all week, in which I think Cambry is not a bad option at all. The Seahawks allow the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends, so I think he's a decent streamer for sure. I'm staying away from these running backs. I'm just rocking with these 2 wide receivers until this offense can show that they can, maintain drives and have Jameis not turn the ball over. It's been the same thing for year after year after year. Going over to the Seahawks side, I think the Seahawks offense is just unbelievably efficient. Tyler Lockett caught all 6 of his targets for an even 100 yards last week. DK Metcalf with more fantasy points than yards. He had 2 touchdowns on only 13 yards. Tyler Lockett is a must-play wide receiver too every week. I think going forward for sure, he's clearly the best wide receiver on the team. And I think with the absence of Will Dissly, I think Metcalf is going to continue to be a great flex play. We saw Rashad Penny come in actually and get 55 yards on 8 carries. And as a guy that has Rashad Penny in 2 leagues, that was nice to see. And it was his second best game of the year. But I mean, Chris Carson is still the lead back, and the team's going to want to run the ball. I think maybe down the stretch, they'll end up giving a little bit more work to Rashad Penny to try and maybe conserve Chris Carson for the playoffs. But maybe this is something. Maybe next week he gets 10 carries instead of 8. Maybe the next week it goes to 12. We'll have to keep an eye on that. And the Bucs have been really tough versus running backs this year, but I'm still willing to play Chris Carson. Maybe this is a game the Seahawks can't really rely on the run as much as they have, and we see them air it out a little bit more versus this Bucs defense that allows the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the 7th most to wide receivers, and the 2nd most to tight ends. So I think we see some points put up by the Seahawks this week in this game where the Buccaneers are coming into town. One quick thing, another little betting spot that I missed going over the 49ers Cardinals game. If you're a FanDuel guy, you can go on there and you can see other wagers. One of them that I really like to look at is the home team and away team over-unders. For a couple weeks there, I think it was the Dolphins versus the Titans, and then the Dolphins versus the Bills. I took the whatever. I think the Dolphins were the away team both times. I took the away team unders, and they hit both times. Right now, it's home team under 16 for the Cardinals, and as I outlined earlier, this rookie quarterback on a short week against a really good defense. I think that might be another one I might throw at the end of my little parlay ticket. I really like this 49ers defense. They look absolutely awesome. So that's going to do it for the NFC home games, week 8. This is week 9. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you tune in tomorrow for the AFC home games. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.